Hello and welcome to a new video. In this one I'm going to replace this broken glass on this Honor 8 smartphone. So this is going to be a glass only repair, meaning that I am going to separate the glass from the screen and use the same screen installing a new glass on it. Before attempting this kind of repair, you have to check that the screen and touch both work perfectly, since the touch is also integrated into the screen, which will be saving. To separate the back cover from the phone, you need some kind of a heating platform to soften up the glue. I recommend using something like a razor blade with a wide area that helps spread the force being applied to the glass and that prevents breaking it. Also, don't yank the fingerprint reader flex cable like I did, be more careful with it. With this repair in this video, I don't remove the complete bezel under the back glass of the phone. I just remove the 3 screws and one metallic bracket holding the screen flex cable. With this, I'm just barely able to remove the battery connector, which needs to be removed and reconnected multiple times through this process. While I got away with that with this repair, I don't recommend doing this, since this way the battery connector very easily touches something it shouldn't. So this way a tiniest slip up easily ends up breaking the phone. Also, this applies extra stress to the very brittle battery connector flex cable, which can break if it's bent back and forth too many times. For that reason, I rather recommend doing what I did with this black Honor 8. So I removed all the screws holding the bezel down and then removed the bezel completely. This way the battery connector is left exposed and can be detached and reconnected more safely. Anyway, after the battery connector is disconnected, the battery itself needs to be separated from the phone. On the Honor 8 there's one pull tab that is revealed under the battery connector. By pulling on it slowly and carefully, you can get rid of one of the adhesive strips in the corner of the battery. After that, it will be a bit less difficult to start the battery separation process from that one corner. Of course, the battery removal process will still be a huge pain, especially trying to keep the battery intact and the cables under it, especially the display cable. If you wanna use some kind of liquid to help soften up the glue in detaching the battery or the screen, remember that this is an LCD screen, so any kind of liquid will instantly seep between the LCD and the backlight and ruin the screen permanently. So only thing you can use here is something that completely evaporates, like 99.9% isopropanol. And you are anyway going to need 99.9% isopropanol for the separation of the LCD from the glass later. With LCD screen only glass repairs, using something like hand soap, eucalyptus oil or nail polish remover will result in the repair failing, since the stuff will get stuck between the screen and the backlight permanently, ruining the screen. After prying the screen up with a wide razor blade, weakening the glue a little bit, I just about managed to insert this thin metallic prying tool. As you can see, it's bending the glass quite a lot, so this will really easily break the screen. For that reason, I recommend using a plastic prying tool like a plastic card I used to pry up the battery. In this case, the glass itself isn't badly shattered, and that makes this part easier. The adhesive in the bottom part of the screen is really strong and you need to spend quite a bit of time working at it slowly. Once you get a prying tool between the glass and the frame, you can just kind of leave it onto a heating platform with the prying tools inserted, and the screen will kind of pry itself up very slowly. Again, I recommend using something wide here like this razor blade. It helps spreading the stress applied to the glass on a larger area. Also, when you insert a prying tool like this, you need to keep in mind that the screen's flex cables extend below the screen itself, so you can easily break the flex cables by poking at them with these prying tools. So keep in mind that under the screen there's actually way less clearance than it would appear, and slicing through the adhesive on the edges of the screen is actually even more tricky. To be more safe here, I'm using a plastic card, but even with this it's really easy to break the LCD screen. This is difficult and really frustrating because you need to use a bit of force to get through the glue, but you can't use any force towards the LCD screen on the side. Tiniest motion to the wrong direction here and the screen will be broken. After spending a while slowly slicing through the glue multiple times, I had made a wide enough gap to be able to insert the plastic card actually under the display. You need to do this very carefully, since if you try to insert the plastic card between the glass and the display will break. So if there's any resistance, don't try to push the card any further. Now that the card is actually under the display, the prying will get a bit easier, but anyway it's going to be important to not apply too much force and stop immediately when there's resistance. You will need to use the heating platform regularly in order to keep the glue high enough temperature so that it can be sliced through. Also, you need to keep watching out for the display flex cable. It's easy to slice through that also. Since only glass repairs are quite a difficult process, it's really expected to break a few screens when you start getting into only glass repair. For this reason, it's really useful to keep checking the screen. Once in a while you can reconnect the screen cable and the battery and check that the display still works. This is a good practice for multiple reasons. Firstly, you won't need to waste your time with this screen once you notice that it's broken. And secondly, if you know at which stage you broke the screen, you know to be more careful at that part next time you're attempting a glass-only repair. If you do this without checking at any point if the screen works or not, and it in the end turns out to be broken, you won't know if you broke it while separating it from the phone, cleaning it from the old LOCA glue, or in applying the new glass on the screen. In other words, you won't be gaining any experience from this. After now having done around 10 successful only glass replacements, I can tell that I've broken multiple screens at all of those stages of the process. Slicing through the glue on this other side of the display will be even more difficult since the screen is broken from this side. By the way, here's a good demonstration why it's easy to break the screen flex cable accidentally. Anyway, next there's some tiny shards of glass on the way and we need to carefully pry those away. They need to be carefully removed because if left here they will be poking the screen while we try to remove it, and that will easily result in the screen breaking. To cleanly pick this out of the way, the screen needs to be at high enough temperature, so you need to use the heating platform quite a lot. When the screen is at high enough temperature, the LOCA glue will be soft enough to be able to pry the shards away. When removing tiny shards like this, it's best to pry it towards the side. If you try to pry it up, the other side of the tiny glass shard will be poking the display. The display assembly is now mostly separated from the phone. However, the top part of the phone has again been glued to the frame with strong adhesive. When prying with a plastic card towards the corner of the display, there will be more glue in the top part of the phone, and therefore this will apply more pressure on the display. The plastic card is here applying quite a lot of pressure onto the corner of the display from the underside, and the corners are of course easiest to break. Finally, the display assembly has been separated from the phone, so now we can move to separating the display from the glass. As you can see here, the new glass I'll be installing isn't quote unquote original, meaning it lacks the Honor logo. I consider that just to be an upgrade. With the heating platform at 80 degrees Celsius and the vacuum function enabled, we can start slicing through the LOCA adhesive slowly with the diamond wire. When beginning this process, it's important to check that the diamond wire is right up against the glass so that the polarizer layer will be left intact on the LCD side. Also, to guarantee the highest chance of the survival of the polarizer layer, it's good to only start from one of the corners and then work towards the other upper corner of the display and then downwards from there. Here again we need to keep in mind that the flex cables are on the bottom part of the display, so we don't want to break those with the diamond wire. So we need to be extra careful with the bottom part of the display. Since this screen was not badly shattered, it was quite easy to slice through the glue. It can be more difficult when the screen is completely shattered. I have another video of that kind of a phone. After a successful separation of the screen from the glass, we can check that the display still works. And it does, although there seems to be a black spot. This is not yet a game over for the screen, and I'll show what we can do about this later. For now, let's move on to the next step, which is cleaning off the old LOCA glue from the display. Cleaning glue from the screen doesn't sound difficult at all, but actually this is a very difficult part of the process as well. With my first glass-only repairs, I was actually stuck at this point for a very long time. LOCA glue is really difficult to get rid of, and the screen of course is really easy to break. Again, here you can only use 99.9% isopropanol because that completely evaporates. For me, for a long time the 99.9% isopropanol didn't seem to work on the glue at all. Then at some point I realized it does, it's just really slow. There's quite a thick layer of the LOCA and it takes time for the isopropanol to properly dig through the glue. So like the other steps of this whole glass only replacement process, this too is mostly about patience. You also need to keep applying more of the isopropanol all the time as it evaporates away very quickly. It's entirely normal that it will seem like there's no progress being made. Actually, the isopropanol is working on the glue little by little and eventually it'll come off the screen actually quite easily. You just need to keep working at it. You also need to keep in mind that there's no glass on the display now, so it's even more brittle and it's even more easy to break. And of course use proper protective equipment like gloves and a mask or respirator, and do this in some kind of space that has some kind of air conditioning. This process will take quite a bit of time and you don't want to spend that breathing in the isopropanol and whatever is in the glue. Okay, so the LOCA glue is cleaned and the screen still works, however there's still the black spot. It's gotten a bit smaller on its own, but it's definitely still there. After 2 days the black spot had shrunk even more, but it wouldn't completely disappear on its own. After searching YouTube for possible solutions, I learned that you can kind of just gently poke at it with a plastic tool and it'll for some reason slowly disappear. Why did this work? Is it permanent? Will the black spot come back at some point? I have no idea about any of those. Somebody who knows about LCD screens will have to comment on that. Anyway, for me it did work, it seemed to fix it completely, but will the black spot reappear like after 2 years or something? I have no idea about that. For this next part the screen needs to be completely clean, so no any specks of dust. Because this is an LCD screen, we cannot use liquid LOCA adhesive, so we can use this kind of LOCA sheet. So this is a thin layer of adhesive between two protective plastic layers. So we need to peel the underside protective plastic away and then carefully line it up with the screen. From this point we can press it on the screen And for this purpose I'm just using an old broken Samsung display assembly. There are LOCA rollers that are made for this purpose. I haven't tried one of those, but maybe that would help apply the LOCA layer on the screen more evenly and cleanly. I don't know though. It's most important to keep pressing down while doing this so that there's no air bubbles left on the screen. There's usually some small air pockets left. It would be best to do this in a one motion, but I didn't manage to do that here. Next, the LOCA sheet needs to be cut in the form of the screen, so the edges of the LOCA sheet need to be trimmed off. You can use something like a razor blade or a really sharp knife for this. This again looks simple, but is another opportunity to break the screen. I have broken one on this step too, since with a knife it's really easy to accidentally apply some pressure on the edge of the screen. It's also really easy to break the screen with scissors while trying to trim off the leftover LOCA from the sides and from the top of the screen. Next, the display can be put back into the phone, and then we can remove the upper plastic protective layer from the LOCA. I think this tiny flathead screwdriver works okay for this. This is important to also do in a one motion, so not stop in the middle and not to let the protective plastic fall back on the screen. This can result in more air bubbles trapped between this LOCA layer and the glass when that's applied on top of it. While I'm peeling the protective plastic away here, I'm holding the screen down on the phone from the flex cable part. Touching the LOCA layer at this point would of course result in dust getting stuck forever on the screen. After removing the protective plastic also from the glass side, I applied the glass on top of the LOCA. The reason for having the display inside the phone at this point is so that we can apply the glass on top of it in correct alignment. Here I'm only pressing on the middle of the screen so that the screen would stick onto the LOCA and the display only from one or two spots. So while they are in the phone, we don't want to completely press the glass and the display together, only that much that they will keep the correct alignment. After that, the display assembly can be taken out of the phone. The LOCA might stick to the phone frame a bit, so you'll need to be careful here. Once the display assembly is out of the phone, we can see that there are darker spots, which mean that the display has adhered to the LOCA layer there. From here we can choose a darker spot in the middle of the screen and just begin applying a bit of pressure there, not too much again since the display will easily break. But yeah, this way we can make the glass stick to the LOCA bit by bit, starting from the middle towards the edges of the screen. The reason why I took the display assembly out of the phone for this is that now I can apply pressure simultaneously from the underside of the display, and this is very important because the glass itself doesn't bend at all, but the display under the glass does. So you can't do this by pressing on the glass, you need to press on the display under it. Now, as I don't have a vacuum chamber or a compressor, I cannot remove all the air bubbles. There will be some left, especially those air bubbles in the bottom corners where you start applying the LOCA film. There's usually some air pockets left. The smallest ones will disappear on their own, but usually the larger ones will stay in some form. In the end of the video I'll show how the phone looks like after a couple of days. Now the actual only glass replacement is done and we can reassemble the phone like after a normal screen replacement. The earpiece grill needs to be taken from the old glass to the new glass. The old adhesive holding the screen in place needs to be removed and new adhesive applied, and then the screen can be glued onto the phone. I used some rubber bands to apply pressure while the glue dries, and I waited 24 hours. After that we can finish reassembling the phone, so the 3 screws and 1 metallic bracket need to go back into their place, and of course the back glass. I think glass back covers are quite a stupid idea. If your back cover is broken, you need to order a new one from China, and that'll take some time and is generally unnecessary and wasteful. I had to get several while repairing some Honor 8s, and so I had to transfer the fingerprint reader and the camera flash thing, whatever that is. So the new glasses are FRD AL00, so they are the Chinese variant, but the glass itself is the exact same between the Chinese and European variant. Usually when you buy a glass back for a phone, it comes with adhesive strip pre-applied, but that adhesive is completely useless. You'll have to use glue anyway. So now that the back glass is glued onto the phone, we have a complete Honor 8 again. When you look closely while the screen is off, you can definitely spot the air bubbles, and actually as well when the screen is on. So this isn't one of the cleanest Honor 8 only glass replacements I've done. I'll show a couple more after this. Here you see it again with the screen on, and well, I definitely wouldn't sell this to a customer as a grade A refurbishment or anything. I think it's perfectly fine, and I definitely like the ability to make only glass replacements without proper machines like vacuum chamber. Here's another Honor 8 I replaced the glass for, and as you can see there's some marks on the screen that I think are left from the old broken screen. These marks show up only when the screen is displaying black for some reason. Also the touch and the screen work perfectly otherwise. With this same phone I actually achieved a way better result at the only glass replacement compared to the golden Honor 8. Not completely sure why, but one thing I did differently was that I began pressing the screen on the display from the bottom and upward, since that is usually the problematic part. As you can see here, there's also some tiny air bubbles left, but it definitely seems to me there has to be a technique that would allow like almost perfect result every time. Why there tends to be air pockets left in the bottom corners and bottom edge of the display probably has to do with the fact that I'm using the old Samsung display assembly to press the LOCA layer onto the screen. I've also changed the glass onto this other blue Honor 8, and as you can see it's the worst and least clean result. These big air pockets in the top corner of this display have been caused by the protective layer falling back on the LOCA sheet when trying to peel it. And as you can see, the screen and touch both still perfectly work, and I would say that the phone is still perfectly usable. Then there's this black Honor 8, and this actually has a screen that's not original. I bought this screen as a complete replacement display assembly some years ago, but I never used it, and now I checked if it works since I had many Honor 8 phones. Turned out the digitizer had a ghost touch problem while the screen did work. I thought that it would be possible for the ghost touch problem to be caused by bad alignment of the display to the glass, and I tried replacing the glass on that display actually 2 times, but it didn't help. The ghost touch problem would always eventually return. So it just turned out that that display had a broken digitizer or touch layer. So this phone needs a complete replacement display assembly. That's necessary because with Honor 8 the touch layer is integrated into the display itself. With some other phones like Honor 8 Lite that I have here, the touch layer is actually integrated to the glass. So with Honor 8 Lite you can replace a non-working touch with only glass repair. With Honor 8 you can't do that.